everyone, welcome to Recruiting Connections with Chris Murdoch. I hope this finds you doing well, and just want to remind you all that if this does become popular and this does become a drinking game for either coffee or alcohol, depending on when you're drinking it, you get to drink every time one of us says the word connect, connections, or connecting. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Kevin Grossman, a phenomenal human being. And someone I've gotten to know through the speaker circuit. I'll let Kevin go ahead and introduce himself.
Chris, thanks for having me on. Is there such thing as coffee drinking games?
I'm not going to promote drinking before noon.
If there's coffee drinking games, that's fun. Chris, thanks for having me on. So hi, everybody. Kevin Grossman, president of Talent Board and the Candidate Experience Awards. And we do candidate experience benchmark research. That's our core offering that we've done for well over a decade now, and have surveyed over 1.25 million candidates. And every year, a few hundred companies participate in our benchmark research around the world, and we help them better understand their recruiting strengths and weaknesses through the eyes of their candidate ratings and experiences, from pre-application to onboarding.
And if I remember correctly, you also do training. You help companies.
So yes, besides our core benchmark research, we have a few related educational programs too. That includes workshops and trainings. It includes candidate experience optimization, where we actually help you improve the experience throughout, from pre-application to onboarding, based on our best practices that we've learned over a decade of research, and other related educational programs. So it's beyond the benchmark research. Yes.
That's great, because I think this is a good way to start. When it comes to building connections, you have to one, make the connection, make the connection, build a connection, then maintain that connection. In the candidate experience, it's the same thing. Your recruiting team is going out making those connections, and then your recruiting team is then trying to build those relationships with the talent pool, and then ultimately you have to maintain that relationship. And so training, we find that training is incredibly important in making sure that all three of those steps are followed correctly. All of those things are enabled by technology or process. How do you view that?
So, Chris, that's a really important point, and the way that you were outlining kind of the three tiers of connection, because one of the things that we have found year over year is that it's one thing for an organization of any size and scope and industry, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, to identify some strengths and weaknesses in their recruiting process as it relates to getting candidate feedback. And I would even argue, we could talk about this too, getting recruiter feedback as well as hiring manager feedback internally too. That's actually important parts of the equation. But getting some understanding what the strengths and weaknesses are, making some improvements, and usually we're talking about incremental improvements. Yes, there are the big ticket items of if you're going to be purchasing a new technology platform, for example, and implementing it, or making some major process overhauls. But a lot of the times, what companies find and what we help them understand is that it could be incremental changes to communication and feedback loops. The hardest part is that third connection part of the tier that you outline, which is the sustaining over time. That is the hardest part we see year after year in our research, because of business impacts that happen all the time. Who plans for a pandemic, Chris?
Everybody.
Right?
Everybody,
right?
does.
Nobody does. And not only that, but you have leadership changes at your organization, maybe changes on the recruit. Right now, we've got, recruiters playing musical chairs, much less employees quitting everywhere still. So you've got changes on the recruiting team. You have, maybe there's M&A activity that your company is involved in. The list goes on. All of those things impact the business, which impacts recruiting and hiring. And we know when it's a downturn, unfortunately, recruiting's the first to go. And when things ramp back up, it's the first to quickly come back and frenetically ramp. And that's kind of what we've seen the past few months. But the sustaining of a quality candidate experience, and experience for all players for that matter, that's the hardest part.
And this is where, I'd love your opinion on what we're doing in training. Yeah. We talk about our values as a company, and we want to be a good a good partner to our clients,
Mhm.
to our candidates, and our colleagues. And so we're saying that from the get-go, right from the very beginning of someone's first day with us. We're helping them understand that this is our culture. This is part of our value statement. And I think with when you make it part of the company value, when you make it part of the company's DNA, whether it's whether you do it from the beginning of starting the company, or you try to do that incremental change to kind of change the DNA, then it helps that even if someone leaves, that part, that core competency of building those connections within all of the aspects of recruiting. So candidates, interviewers and hiring managers, and the people that you're working with, that's where we've been able to sustain creating a great experience.
And 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 I'm sure that part of that is also investing in consistency too in
Mhm.
their experience. So not only for external candidates that you eventually hire, but also for your own, again, your current employees, right? What is their ongoing experience? Because we're all perpetual candidates at any given time, period. That's end of story. Whether we're actively looking or not, it doesn't matter, because something, one bad day changes our mind, we turn our head and we're gone, and that happens all the time. So, and I'm sure what you've built, the culture that you've built at your organization, also starts before day one,
Yes.
because, right, it has to, because those things that happen, I mean, especially the final interview to offer to onboard stage, right, is a critical time, because and especially in today's bonkers market that we're in, because that interaction that they have with you, hopefully they're talking to their manager before they start, and they're being immersed, even if it's in a virtual capacity, which we've had to do a lot of in the past 2+ years. They're immersing in the culture, they're connecting with teammates they'll be working with even before day one. All of these things are great retention starters out of the day, besides taking care of paperwork, because that crap is going to happen. You got to do that
Yeah.
anyway, right? But it's those other things that build that trust early on before day one. And then right after that, then you go 30, 60, 90, and there you go. That's super, super important. And we see that in the past few years, most of the employers, even those who have really high candy ratings, in our research, the candidate ratings, onboarding is an area that companies have struggled with, and the pandemic hasn't helped
No.
at all. And it's a tough one to do. And don't forget, that group is important, because that's the group that's going to help you grow and sustain your company, and you want to retain too the whole bunch of folks that many companies, maybe even yours or maybe not, maybe you hire. I think you mentioned to me before, you hire a lot of the folks that apply for jobs that are qualified, of course, but there's so many people that don't get hired, right?
Yes.
And that group, especially those who have made that investment through at least final interview, those experiences impact whether or not they're willing to try again with you, willing to refer others. And if you were a consumer-based business, we see it every year, potentially make purchases or influence them at least. And that's real. And that's a part that we've been trying to help Chris connect the dot for companies, is that it does impact the business on some level. Referrals are harder to quantify, but it's real though.
Oh yeah. And referrals is probably the largest population and the largest source of candidates for us.
Sure.
And then, we have the Indeed, and we have, applications through LinkedIn.
Right.
We have people that are finding us on our website, but it's our reputation online on Glassdoor, our reputation on Facebook, our rankings there. One of the things we figured out is that also in the part of the retention part,
mm-hmm.
we're participating in top employer, best places to work surveys, especially here in Nashville, where we have the bulk of our employees. We're doing an employee engagement survey, so that we can give our team a voice, so that we can kind of cement those, cement the relationship we're building with the employees. I mean, whether they've been here 10 years or 10 hours, we want them to be able to provide a voice they want to be heard. And have you noticed that candidate experience and employee experience has become, more front and center with millennials, or has this always been the case, or is it becoming more? Are we becoming more aware because the millennial generation and the centennials that are now getting into, or Gen Z that's getting into the workforce, is that highlighting the need for this?
That's because us old Gen Xers don't care. We're like the Breakfast Club. I don't care what you think of me. I mean, I would argue that it's across generations but I think that what we see in our data, and this is true of Gen Z and millennials, probably more so for Gen Z, they're newer to the workforce too. When you think about their, and so expectations are different than somebody who's been a professional employee for many years, or management, or so there's different nuance and complexity that will vary depending on who you are. But yes, I would argue that what we see in the data, in our research data, they want to truly know what it's like to work at your place, why they are, is anybody staying at your place, what are the development opportunities for me. I remember just a few years ago we were joking, and it wasn't really a joke, because I think a lot of folks were saying like, oh, these millennials, they get hired and they ask, when can I get promoted? And I'm like, I'm sure it wasn't exactly like that, in reality.
That's the stereotype. It's
a stereotype. But I think that what the questions were is, what are my development opportunities? Right? Maybe there were those folks who said, when do I get promoted? I don't know. When do I get my trophy? But you know what I mean, though. I think that they want to really know, what is it like to work there? Why do people stay there? What are your diversity and inclusion initiatives? That's super high priority in our research. The candidates tell us, and that's across generations too. And what are your community and sustainability initiatives, whether you're a local business down the street or you're a global multinational organization? I mean, there's a lot more that younger generations, but all generations, I think, want to know more about before they say, okay, this is a place that I want to work. And I can tell you, how much, I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into employer branding, right? And that's great. It's very important for organizations to get, their EVP right, their employee value propositions right, to get their branding right. It's a marketing like any other marketing at the end of the day. And it's important to make that investment. But if you're not fixing everything else, if you're not improving the experience from what happens after I decide, oh, I actually do want to apply for a job because I like how you're presenting yourself.
The experience of a candidate starts before they've even applied.
It does. And if you've wooed me at the point of brand, but yet it is like it is a harrowing experience, and maybe that's not the right word, but it's throughout the rest of it, and I'm being ghosted by you, and I know candidate ghosting is way up too, and I get that, but my point is that any investment that I've made in the brand is negated long term, maybe not short term, but long term, because of the expense, and not only because of the candidate experience, but as my employee experience too, right? And we depend on those referrals. And if you start running numbers, we've been playing with numbers a little bit, trying to figure out, I mean, what the cost of vacancy is. And if you don't have the referrals that you depend on, you start taking a hit there. I mean, you can run some numbers. It can start adding up quite quickly, the cost to the organization. So my whole point is that make the investment throughout the experience and then sustain it. And that goes back to your whole point about the three connections, right?
We look at what works. We look at what's not working. And even if it's, and if it's not, something's not working, some part of our recruitment process wasn't working, we would, look at ways to fix it, ask questions internally. What could we have done differently? We're looking at what can we do different. We're asking questions of the brand new trainees as soon as they finish did this meet your expectations? Did it exceed your expectations? What could we have done differently? So now the next the next class, the next group of people that we hire are going to have that much more positive of an experience.
Right.
So we're constantly asking those questions. But the great thing is, I'm not the one that has to do it. I was the one that had to do it 10 years ago. We have an engine now of new people coming into the training.
Sure.
We have new people doing the training, and we're getting different perspectives, and we have more people coming through than we've ever had before. So we're getting all this great feedback. But luckily, we're an organization where where everybody in leadership wants to keep doing this, because it, one, helps us attract more people through just our own organic efforts or referrals. It helps us, retain the employees to where they don't want to leave. I mean, we have some employees that have been with us this year. We have our first hire in Nashville is still here. We have quite a few of our first 20 employees. We have over half of them are still here. So we have, created this, this culture where people want to stay. But that's not going to, if we just stay the same and we stop listening and we try to keep being what we were then, it's never going to, we're not going to be able to attract the new people. We're not going to retain.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, you still have to evolve. You have to sustain and evolve, but you can't, but it's so easy because we see it every single year, how think about the book From Good to Great, right? And the businesses that were talked about in that book, a decade later, I don't remember the exact number, but many of them weren't even around anymore. But I mean, and that things change, business change, all these different impacts that I'm talking about. And so again, the hardest part is sustaining and evolving, to be honest, at the end of the day. And I think that there are things that are unique to generations of what they're looking for when it comes to work. But I think for all of us, though, we're totally seeing what the pandemic has done. It's created the super accelerator of changes that were already taking place.
Yeah.
People were like, I'm not being paid enough. I don't like this, the toxic culture that I'm at right now. I mean, the list goes on. And everybody wants, says, I want to figure out how I want to work, where I want to work. And hence the millions and millions of people in the past, 6+ months, whatever those numbers are, that have left and changed jobs and have become entrepreneurs and started their own things, or just haven't gone back altogether yet because that's just not something that I've got to take care of my family, or what the list goes on. We've never seen some of these dramatic things before, so it's important. And we've heard for years in other studies, McKinsey studies, Deloitte studies, that CEOs and business leaders, our most important asset is our people. And I don't want to mock that per se, but I'm like, that's always been kind of a hard one to swallow sometimes, considering what we've seen over the years, right? With wage disparity, gender inequality, race inequality in the workplace, but now, it truly is important. And candidate experience, employee experience, talent acquisition. It's not order taking. It is literally the life force of an organization. And the business leaders that get that and understand it are the ones that are going to be more competitive. They're the ones that are going to win in the end and retain their people and be able to attract and hire others. Those that don't understand how important TA is in an organization, will continue to struggle, because we're going to only see more of this world. We're never going back. It's just, I'm not a soothsayer anyway. I'm never going to be one. We're never going back there. It's just, it's not going to happen. Things might settle in a little bit here and there, because we have seen candidate resentment go up again from the first year of the pandemic, but we're not going back, Chris, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that we've been able to do, and we hear, we've been able to fill our training classes. We're looking to get 12 to 15 people in every month to go through the training. We have consistently for the last 12 months, hit those numbers. And one of the reasons being is because we are, focusing on the experience of our employees. We also made some changes to our recruiting process, to our training process, but we also started to emphasize empathy. Hire empathetic people, treat people with empathy. And once they're here, the same thing.
Exactly.
We want to make sure that we are being, mindful of each other. We've actually, what's interesting is it used to be when we'd say we want to give you the flexibility to be yourself. Some
Mhm.
people took that as to, I get to work whenever I want. And so we had to define what
Sure.
flexibility in the
Sure.
workforce meant, and what work-life balance meant.
There's still rules, Chris. There's still got to be rules.
Well, we didn't define it.
Right.
And then once we defined it, yeah, there were some people that left because they're like, oh, they're going to tell me to get up at, but get into work before 11.
Sure.
So those people kind of, those people, made there was like two. But once we put in some, it's really weird. When we started putting in more rules, happiness went up, satisfaction went up, because people understood that, when you come in, and that we weren't just paying lip service, that you can develop, but how you develop is kind of up to you and how much control you take. So by saying that on the front end, it's created a much more consistent experience across the from the time that they go from being an associate to a recruiter and now a senior recruiter. The experience is so much more positive because we've met or exceeded expectations.
Right.
We're just blowing smoke.
And just real quick, my wife works for a nonprofit social, emotional, and physical safety skills organization called Kid Power. And one of the tenets of the things that they're training children, teens, and adults on all the time is boundary setting. And for us to be emotionally safe, physically safe, but boundary setting is critical in all things, including the world of work. And that's just another way of what you're saying, is putting parameters in place. And these are boundaries. Yes, we want you to be able to be flexible within this boundary, right? And that's that's what you're talking about. But that way we do that as humans, we need some guardrails, right? At the end of the day, why do you think it's so? Time and again, it's been so difficult. Anytime an employer says we have unlimited vacation, that it's so difficult for employees to take advantage of that.
Yes, and actually, it's so funny that you mentioned that. We said we had flexible PTO.
Sure.
And we never called it unlimited, but that word got into the, got out there, that, oh, I've got unlimited PTO. But they forgot that you still had to ask, for the time off. You couldn't just take the time off. You have to get permission. You got to make sure that there's PTO someone to cover you. So, because we started to say, oh no, you can't do that, they forgot. They took that word unlimited. So we actually had to really sit down and define a PTO policy, because just saying it's flexible and you still have to go permission, it didn't help. It didn't help. We had to really spell it out, because otherwise people didn't really understand what it meant, because they didn't have any context. A lot of new people, a lot of our new people have never had a corporate job or had to ask for time off like that before they came out of school.
And we try, and then in the States, in North America, but primarily the States compared to Europe, for example, and or APAC, and even Latin America, our idea of vacations and time off is different. There's a lot more time that is definitely, I would argue, taken. And I'm sure that I've seen research, and I'm sure you can find it, about the differences. But I know even for our small firm, it's a little bit more fluid, but it's not literally it's unlimited, but it's as long as we're getting the stuff done and there's coverage, we'll figure it out. That's my rule.
Yeah, well, I think that should be everybody's rule. Like,
well, that's true, but that's not always. I mean, that's not always the case. And we're a small firm, but we've been starting to grow a little bit. So those will be different pains. As you know, starting to add more and more folks. There are definitely things that you have to. Wow, we got to put this in place now. So I think that's all said and done. But I think tying it back to the experience side of your employees, of your candidates, to be able to understand that is why you'll get more referrals at the end of the day. Those are all part of that. The idea of culture and not culture fit, but just how do I fit in the culture? What can I bring to the culture? Right. Culture add is another way. But how that is super important. And I think those are things that fall off the face of the earth sometimes, because, you get, unfortunately, I've seen it time and again, you get a new business leader, maybe it's a TA leader, maybe it's a CHRO, maybe it's just another business leader, and the priorities completely change again. And it right, and it's not, and candidate and or employee experience is not important because we've got all these other things to do, and those are the companies that bleed out.
Yeah, that's where, going through rapid growth, 7 years ago versus today,
Right.
we'd had 20 people and 3 new clients, in 6 months, and people were freaking out because the stress level went up.
Sure.
But we've added, almost 300 people in the last 12 months, and it's been seamless because we focused on the experience.
That's great.
On, and listened. That was the number one.
Yeah. Empathic communication and listening is very, very, very important. And it is something that people can learn to do. Not everybody has a lot of it, but you can learn it, and you can learn to be empathetic. So,
well, I mean, whether it's your personal life, professional life,
all of it,
it's all the same way that you build and maintain those relationships and make those connections. And that's why the Net Promoter Score is so important to consumer product companies. Would you recommend this to your friends?
Right. Exactly.
Those are, would you recommend this company? Would you recommend, this product? Would you recommend this person? Because you have LinkedIn recommendations, you have, Glassdoor reviews, Indeed reviews, you have LinkedIn comments. If you want to promote yourself and show who you are, you actually have to listen more than you say these days.
Yeah, you do. I completely agree.
Well, I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up here.
Sure.
Is there anything we should have talked about that we didn't, or do you think we kind of covered it all, or covered the big stuff?
Well, there's always something I could blab on about, Chris, but as it relates to candidate experience. But I think the biggest thing is to be consistent and sustain a quality, positive candidate experience is something that I wish more companies would invest in. I think, and there are many that are, in our Candy community, but I think that regardless of what the market looks like, whether it's a bonkers talent world like we're in now, or there's a downturn again, God forbid, or whatever happens, that to be consistent in that experience at every single stage, and then even as an employee, and to work on it, repeat it, rinse, repeat, all those things. That's really the big thing for me today. Yeah, that I wanted to convey.
Thank you. And what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to get connected?
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look me up, Kevin W. Grossman, on LinkedIn, or go to thetalentboard.org, which is our website. Lots of great resources and information about our benchmark research, about our other educational programs that we offer. But those are probably the 2 best ways.
And as someone who's attended the Candies, being in a room full of people who care was a lot of fun. And if you're early on in the journey of looking at candidate experience, I would recommend attending the Candy Awards.
Oh, sure.
And because it was a phenomenal experience, learning from great people, from great companies, and just having those conversations in the hallway, in addition to the award ceremony, was just it was fascinating to just see how the word empathy popped up everywhere. And it's one of the reasons why we are that way, because it was early on in the development of IQTP and IQ Talent Partners. So we I highly recommend it. So
I thank you, Chris.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time today. And I think I'll, if you want me on your podcast, I'd love to hear myself talk.
We're going to do that. I think we might've already scheduled something. So absolutely.
What's the name of your podcast?
The Candy Shop Talk. Because I always like to talk shop. There you go.
I like it. Well, we'll put links to your bio on LinkedIn. We'll put links to the talent board, and we'll put links to your podcast as well.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Kevin.